Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for all the overwhelming responses and positive comments that I've had over these last couple of days. The channel's really taken off, which is 100% would not have happened without you guys, so I really do appreciate that. As a result of that, and because I want to give back, I thought that maybe I could do a giveaway of some kind where I'm going to be picking one student in order for me to be basically tutor them for free one-to-one over these next coming days. So all you have to do in order to be eligible for that is make sure you like the channel, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. It can just be anything at all, and I will be picking one of you over the next couple of days, and I'll get in contact with you. But yeah, no, I just thought it would be a way that I would be able to give back to you guys, as it really does mean a lot. So thank you so much. So today we're going to be covering SJT, and we're going to be, most importantly, I think the best thing that I can teach you is about how I actually approach SJT questions. Okay, so we're gonna come on to doing that, but just a couple of things I want to talk about before that. So first of all, I'd like to say that the first thing with SJT is that there are so many common answers in there. It's just about practice. Okay, the good thing with SJT is, like, I don't really think it's necessarily that hard to be able to get either a band 2 or a band 1. I think most people should be able to get a band 1 if you kind of follow some of the ideas in here and you actually understand what the answers mean. Okay, so first of all, there's so many answers that are common. So things like, okay, you should never lie, you should never cheat, you should never steal, things like considering people's competence, considering patient safety, all of these are common ideas. So if you do enough practice, you'll be able to understand some of these answers. Okay, and it's not only just like the very inappropriate or very appropriate answers you're going to be learning as well. You can learn some of the others. So for example, in a scenario where there's like a team, for example, and someone is not doing their work, one of the statements might be about like how the team's feeling or the team's emotions and whether that should be considered, and that's almost always important. Okay, it just is. But we'll come on to kind of some other ideas as well. So as I mentioned about key ideas, so I will talk about this in just a second on the next slide. I've written down some of the key ideas, but we'll come back to that. The other thing that's important in SJT is considering the role of the individual. Okay, so a doctor can prescribe medication, a doctor can do certain things. A medical student is unable to do that, so therefore they will be unable to do anything such as prescribe medication, but they might be able to do something like put in a cannula under supervision from a nurse or a doctor. However, someone who's on work experience most definitely wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, so things change. The other thing is more abstract kind of roles, such as if you're a group leader. So what does it mean to be a group leader? It means you're responsible for the whole team. So it means that you're responsible not only for them, but for all of their actions, and also to make sure you're responsible for them to feel inclusive. Okay, so you're the one who's meant to make sure that everyone's involved, that everyone's ideas are heard, etc, etc. Okay, so the thing that I think is going to be most helpful to you guys is what I'm going to go over today, which is my method of answering. So with SJT, there's two types of questions. You have the most least appropriate and then the importance appropriateness ones, which are out of four. So the importance appropriateness ones, those are where most of the marks are, right? So I'm going to talk you through my logic for doing them, and I think that will be what will be really useful. I will also spend the last couple minutes talking about the most least appropriate questions as well, so we will get onto that. Okay. The other thing that you can do, and sometimes students do, is as an extra, you can read the GMC's Good Medical Practice Guidelines. Okay, this isn't a necessity. You can definitely do well without having done it. But for some students, it is useful because it makes them realize, oh, there's a couple of things I should do that I shouldn't have done, or a couple of things you can do that you didn't think that you were able to do, and vice versa. Okay. Another thing to mention is that often if you don't do anything to a situation, so you don't make it worse, you don't make it better, it's just kind of like neutralish, that's often quite regarded as inappropriate. Okay, so just bear that in mind. And finally, the other really important thing is don't play too safe. So I might be generalizing here, but I'm guessing that most of you guys, if we go back and perhaps if you look at some of your SJT mocks or practices that you've done, the reason why you may have been scoring a little bit lower than what you wanted is because a lot of your answers are partial marks. Okay, I'm making an assumption here, I understand that, but I think that is potentially one of the reasons why you may be scoring lower than what you'd like. Okay, so the reason why I mention this is because most answers in SJT are either A or D. Okay, I know that might not sound right, but if you go back through your test and you have a look, the majority of answers are either A's or D's. But I think that often students think the SJT is like they're trying to trick you more than they actually are, so they try and go too safe. They think, okay, I'll put B just in case it is an A or a C. Like you kind of can't get away with relying too much on partial marks. You do unfortunately have to get those full marks. Okay, so that's important. So my main two pieces of advice are going to be about the method of answering, which we'll get onto, and the other thing, which is that more answers are A and D than you think they are. Okay, so don't try and play too safe. So after this video, I will eventually release an SJT walkthrough as well, where I will do an SJT mock using some of these kind of ideas and explaining my answers, similarly as I have done in both DM and QR. Okay, so it should be helpful. Okay, so first of all, let's have a think about some of the common ideas. These are not all of them. So first of all, patient safety and competence is always a priority. So how competent the doctor is, the fact that they're able to do their job properly, super duper important. Patient safety, obviously super duper important. Next, it's always best to solve locally before escalating. Okay, see if you can attempt to solve it locally and then escalate. The only exceptions to this are, once again, if patient safety is compromised. For example, if you need to decide on what a certain medication is, but I don't know, the senior doctor who prescribed it has gone on holiday, or the junior doctor who prescribed it has gone on holiday and is unreachable, they're not picking up their phone, then it's probably best to go one ahead of them, go to their supervisor or whatever. Okay? Confidentiality, once again, super duper duper important. Okay? The only exceptions are when, once again, when someone is in danger. So once again, patient safety is in danger. So for example, if an individual comes into a GP, they say they've been banned from driving, and they tell the GP, well, listen, I've just driven here today, then the GP has a right to inform the DVLA about that, because they're putting other people at risk, not just themselves, but other people as well. Okay? A couple of other things. So lying, cheating, stealing, these answers are always wrong. These are always wrong things to do, so these are always going to be very inappropriate answers. And finally, regulations, laws, guidelines, these are also always very important, so you just have to follow them. There's a reason why they're there. So things like wearing ID badges for verification when you're on placement, making sure that you follow the strict rules and codes of conduct that they have in place, etc., etc. The other thing that I think can be quite useful is for those of you who have Medify. I'm not sure if you know about this feature. So when you go to the Medify like home practice page, it gives you like a bar chart of like how each of your scores is compared to the average. But instead of choosing like all of your sections, you can choose SJT specifically. And when you choose SJT specifically, it breaks it down into the different sections that they have. So here you can see dealing with emergencies, relative interaction, competence, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so why this is useful is then you can kind of hone in on the areas that you're a little bit weaker about. Okay, so this one I think is health of students and doctors. You can see it's probably my weaker section out of the lot. So what I can do is I can click on that, and when you click on that, it shows you the questions that you got wrong, so you can kind of review them and keep them in mind. So one of the things with SJT is sometimes really weird scenarios come up, and you kind of have no choice other than to just try and learn them. Okay, like there's be like an odd scenario that comes up. Like I said, most of it will repeat and you'll be familiar with, but occasionally an odd scenario will come up, which is absolutely fine because it just means it's a learning tool. Okay, it means you can learn it for next time and you can bear it in mind. Okay, but it's really important to understand this idea and to basically have it there. But I think this is a really useful tool that Medify have done, so you can kind of see, oh, I'm a little bit, weaker when it comes to, let's say, patient quotes or whatever, etc., and then just going from here. Okay, cool. Okay, so now on to the actual questions. And so what I want to talk to you guys about is actually understanding the difference between these terms. So I think often people kind of give answers kind of based on vibes, right? So there's no real understanding or logic behind them. But I like to think that there is a logic behind these answers and that there is a way of understanding how they work. Okay, so this is just a fairly kind of simple question. So first of all, so sometimes you can answer questions without even looking at the passage. So what did I say? Competence and patient safety things are always going to be very important. So this answer's A. Okay, but the question that I want to ask you guys is, what differentiates A from B? Okay, I know that seems kind of like a silly question to ask. Like obviously there's a difference between very important and important. And what differentiates C between D? Obviously, there's a difference between of minor importance and not important at all. But the point that I'm trying to get is, do you have a logic for doing it? Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go on to the next question. And I'm going to explain a logic for it. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. So Mia, a medical student, is on placement at an antenatal clinic in a rural community. The clinic is under-resourced with only one doctor and 3 midwives. A patient comes into the clinic to have a baby delivered. Most staff, including the doctors, are unavailable as they're dealing with emergencies. An experienced midwife requests support from Mia to deliver the baby. Mia does not feel comfortable helping deliver the baby. So, how important to take into account are the following considerations for Mia when deciding how to respond to the situation? So the first one is about the learning experience. So the learning experience that she will get from helping deliver the baby. So the way that I like to think about it, and if you go back, you realize that I called it the 50-50, 50-50 rule. So first of all, you have to decide, is this something to consider or something to not consider? In this case, I would say learning experiences are cool, okay, but in this case here, the baby is what comes first, the baby and the mother, their safety. So I would say that the learning experience does not matter. So I would rule out A and B, so I'd say it's between C and D. But then I would ask myself, is it C or is it D? And this is where we get to the idea of how do you actually differentiate between the two. And the way that I like to think about it is if it's C, there's something to slightly consider here. But if it's D, there's nothing to consider. So are learning experiences important? Yes, they are. They have some value. So I would argue the answer here is C, because overall learning experience doesn't matter, but there's something slightly important here, which is what makes it C as opposed to D, whereas like a D would be like, there's nothing important here at all. Okay, so the answer here is C, not D. So that's what the 50-50, 50-50 rule is, which basically you divide it into either is it important or is it not, and then you further divide it. Ask yourself, is there any kind of positive ideas behind it? Is it all negative, and vice versa? So let's have a look at this question. Jack, a dental student, has been given a minor role in the annual charity comedy and cabaret evening hosted by the Dental School's Drama Society. He has been given a script which he is required to learn for his role. On reading the script, he discovers that the comedy sketch he is involved in makes a joke about international students. Jack finds the joke offensive and feels uncomfortable about performing it. However, when he raises it with the other cast members, they do not share his views. So the main idea here is we have an offensive joke that has to be dealt with. So his relationship with the other cast members if he reports the offensive joke to his tutor. So let's 50-50 it. So first of all, does the relationship matter? Like, what's more priority here? An offensive joke that could potentially be said, or the relationship? I would say it's the offensive joke, okay? And anyway, that's what the SJT guidelines, and that's what the Ucat wants you to say. The offensive joke is more important. So therefore, the relationship is not A or B, it's one of C or D. But, as I said before, is there something important about the relationship? I would say so. I would say that, relationships are still important. You're meant to maintain good kind of teamwork with your colleagues and with your fellow kind of cast members, etc., etc. So for that reason, I would say the answer is C. Okay? So let's go on to this one then. That as he only has a minor role, his views may not be listened to. Well, if you think about this, you've got a situation here. Should he consider the fact that people might not listen to him? No, he shouldn't. So it's not A or B, once again doing the 50-50, because you shouldn't be afraid to speak up about something just because you're a junior or something. And this isn't like the whole system of the NHS, and also just the world that we live in it's not just about it's not like a tyranny as such, right? If you see a problem, you're allowed to speak up about it. You're meant to speak up about it. It's not about how big your role is, or it's not a power control thing. Is there something to consider here? I would say not at all, really. So I would say the answer here is D, because the role at all is not considered. Like, you should never be afraid to speak up about something just because someone might not listen to you. Okay? Yeah, that's not important at all. Okay, what about this one? So the fact that the other cast members do not seem to find the joke offensive. So, once again, let's 50-50 it. Does it matter if the other people don't find it offensive, if Jack finds it offensive? I would say it doesn't matter, because if you find it offensive, you have a right to report it and you have every reason to do so. So a lot of people here put D because they think, like I said, along those lines. But let me just draw a parallel to this situation. So imagine you were at a party and someone makes a joke, and let's say there's 1,000 people at the party and all 999 people are laughing except for you. It's very, very possible, therefore, that you may have misinterpreted something. Do you see? So that's why the answer to this one, I would argue, is C, because there's something to consider here. Okay, overall, in the grand scheme of things, not important, because just because the others don't find it offensive, if Jack finds it offensive, he's more than happy to, we're more than happy for him to speak about it, discuss it, report it, whatever it is. But the fact that no one else seems to find it offensive may raise like a slight thing in his brain, thinking, maybe I just misinterpreted something. Okay, but overall, it doesn't matter. So that's what makes it C as opposed to D. Okay? So let's have a look at this one. Merrin, a medical student, is walking through a hospital corridor when she sees a small pool of liquid in the middle of the floor. She's already 5 minutes late for the start of her shift. However, she does not want to leave without cleaning up. Merrin must decide how to deal with the situation. How important is it to take into account the following considerations for Merrin when deciding how to respond to the situation? That it's not Merrin's job to clean the hospital. Okay, so first of all, I would say, let's try the 50-50 thing. So does it matter about whose job it is to clean the hospital if you see danger? So for example, if you're walking past a burning building and you see a baby on the first floor that you can kind of grab or save or whatever. You're not gonna say, oh, I'm not a firefighter, I'm not gonna try to do it, whatever, right? If you see danger, you have to act on danger. Okay, and I know that my situation might be a bit far-fetched that I made up there, but I'm giving you an example. So we know that it's not about job. So is there something to consider here? I would say not really, because it's not about whose job it is. It's about acting on danger, okay, and dealing with it. So see if you can contrast that to this one, that Merrin is running 5 minutes late for a shift. We do the 50-50 again. Once again, is the shift more important or the immediate danger in front of you? I would say the immediate danger. So I would say that rules out A and B. But this time, is there something to consider here? I would argue yes, because late for her shift means she's talking specifically about patients. And therefore, if she's late for a shift, she's late to see her patients, so her patient's health may be impacted. It's a potential. So there's something to consider here, which is what makes this C. So you can see we've got two very, very similar questions, okay, but one's C and one's D. And the reason why is because this one specifically mentions her patient and the shift. But overall, still, it's not important because in immediate danger in front of us, that's what will always be more important. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so on to the kind of, so all these were kind of like importance questions. So the appropriateness questions work exactly the same. Okay, so Gary is a medical student completing a placement in an outpatient clinic. His next patient is 18-year-old Rachel, who has a significant heart condition. Rachel had surgery 2 years ago to insert a metal heart valve, and because of this, she needs to take blood thinners. She needs to have monthly blood tests to ensure that she's taking the right amount of blood thinners, as if not, this could have serious consequences. Gary notices there were no blood test results for the past 2 months in Rachel's notes. Rachel confirms that she missed the blood test appointments because she does not feel they are necessary. So let's have a look here. Tell Rachel that it is important that she attends her blood test appointments. Okay, so sometimes the verbs can be helpful here. We'll come back to that in a bit. So let's 50-50 here. Tell Rachel it's important that she attends her blood test appointments. I would say that's a good thing to do. I'd say it's between A and B. Okay, that's an appropriate thing to do. But is it very appropriate? Is there something like this that's not great? Well, you can see, it says here, Rachel confirms that she missed the blood test appointments because she doesn't feel they're necessary. So the verb tell just means that they're just stating to Rachel. So it's probably not going to change her mind. The only way Rachel's going to attend the blood test appointments is if she feels they're necessary. But if you just tell someone, that's probably not going to change their mind. Instead, if it said explain, I would argue that this answer's A. But because it says tell, I would say the answer's B, because you're not really helping to change her mind, right? She's probably already been told that they're important, but she clearly doesn't believe it. Okay? But it's still an appropriate thing to say, but it's just not the greatest. There's something here that's not that great about it. Does that make sense? So do you see this idea about the 50-50? So you 50-50 it into both sides, and then from there, see if you can break it down again. Okay? And just one more thing. I know I said a lot of the answers are A and D's, but I've specifically chosen answers that have been more B and C to be able to illustrate my idea about the 50-50. What I'm still saying about more answers being A and D is still true. Okay? But I'm just trying to pick out specific answers to illustrate a point. That's all it is here. Okay. What about this one? So immediately apologise to Marek on Amy's behalf. So Greg, a dental student, is taking part in a clinical placement with two other students, Marek and Amy. They are all friends. One morning, Amy makes what Greg interprets to be an inappropriate joke in front of Marek. Marek does not say anything but appears to be upset. So what's the problem here? Marek is upset and Amy's made a bad joke. What's more important? I would say Marek being upset. So immediately apologise to Marek on Amy's behalf. I would argue that that's an appropriate thing. So one of A or B, because potentially it will stop Amy feeling upset. Sorry, it will stop Marek feeling upset. But is it the best thing to do? I would argue not, because there's something bad about this. And the reason is because it lets Amy kind of get away with it. Like, you're apologising on Amy's behalf. Does that make sense? It should be Amy doing it, essentially. Okay? But at least you do deal with the immediate problem, which is Marek being upset. Okay, so on to the most least appropriate questions then. So with these questions, the important idea is see which main problems are there and if the option deals with the main problems, okay? I know a lot of people do find these questions a lot more challenging and tricky, but the good news is these aren't the ones that are going to dictate your mark, really. Obviously, it's important to get them right, but they're not really the ones that are going to dictate your mark. It's mainly going to be those other questions, and that's where the 50-50, 50-50 technique is going to be really important, I think, okay? And yeah, like I said, they're not as important as the other questions, so even if you do get a couple wrong, it's not the end of the world. That's what I want to say, because a lot of students do stress about this. So let's have a look here. So Ava May, a medical student, is coming to the end of her first placement at a hospital. As part of her training and development, her supervisor has arranged a feedback session on her performance in her first ever placement. The supervisor starts the session by congratulating her on her first placement. However, he proceeds to tell Ava May that some of her colleagues have raised concerns about the way she speaks to her patients. Her colleagues have described her as rude and dismissive. So, suggest to her supervisor that she shadows other doctors so she can learn how best to interact with patients. Ask her supervisor if he can provide additional information based on the feedback so she can better understand the issue. Tell her supervisor she would rather discuss the things she's done well. You can quite clearly see that this is going to be the least appropriate because it kind of avoids the issue at all. Between A and B, I would say B is the most appropriate. The reason being is, with B at least, she's directly trying to find out what's specifically wrong with her style. With A, that's cool, but let's be real. She's probably not intentionally being rude and dismissive, right? So she can shadow all the other doctors for as long as she wants, but if she doesn't actually know what she's doing that's intentionally rude and dismissive, it probably won't change much, if that makes sense. So the top option is kind of a bit neutral, okay? The bottom option definitely makes things worse because it avoids it, and the middle option is going to be the best, okay? So, what about this? So Maya and her classmates are coming out of their final lecture before their exams begin. Maya overhears her friend Ronnie speaking to her other friend Sadie. Ronnie tells Sadie that he will help her study for the exam. The following day, Sadie tells Maya that Ronnie cancelled their study session 1 hour before they were due to meet. Maya knows Ronnie cancelled on Sadie to go watch a film with another friend. So, call Ronnie to advise him to reschedule the study session, as he told Sadie he would help her revise. Call Ronnie to tell him that he should not cancel on Sadie last minute. Say nothing to Ronnie, as he is free to make his own choices. Okay, so I would say, let's think about the problems here. So Sadie doesn't get the help she wants, and Ronnie's done something that he shouldn't have done. So the top one I would argue is the most appropriate because it deals with both of them. It makes Ronnie realise that what he's done is wrong, and probably let Sadie get the help she needs. The middle one at least makes Ronnie realise what he's done is wrong, but perhaps it's a bit confrontational. And the last one doesn't do anything at all. So the last one is going to be least appropriate. Okay? Does that make sense? So it's not the case that there's always a secondary issue, like in the last one there wasn't, but sometimes there is. Okay? A group of medical students are working on an assignment that's due the next day. With little time to spare, Marie, the group leader, wants the group to focus on the task. However, two students, Daniela and Joshua, have started to have a heated discussion because they have differing opinions regarding the approach that should be taken for a small part of the assignment. The discussion is distracting the group from the overall task, and the remaining group members look uncomfortable. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So ask Daniel and Joshua to leave their discussion for later and focus on discussing more important things. Interrupt the discussion and ask the group to vote on the matter that Danielle and Joshua are discussing. Facilitate a discussion between the group regarding the issue that Danielle and Joshua are discussing to agree on an approach. So the important idea here is Marie's the group leader, so she has to be able to listen to everyone. From the kind of use of the verbs, I would say this is the most appropriate because everyone's getting involved and they're listening to what they have to say. Facilitate to agree on an approach. Between A and B, so A says, ask Danielle and Joshua to leave their discussion for later, focus on discussing more important things, and the second one is interrupting the discussion, asking them to vote. So the least appropriate is actually the last one, because it undermines and disregards whatever Danielle and Joshua are talking about, which shouldn't happen. Yes, I know B isn't technically ideal about interrupting, but at least the whole group is having a vote on it, so their idea is still being brought to light. Whereas with the first one, it basically says, what you guys are discussing is irrelevant, which Marie should never say as the group leader. Okay, because her whole idea is to be inclusive and make everyone's voice heard. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I tried to do it as quickly as possible with a couple of different examples. But importantly, I really do believe that SJT shouldn't be that difficult to be able to hit those high band 2, band 1s, and I will do a walkthrough later on, which will be uploaded. But I just want a quick reminder about, as I said, about the free one-to-one giveaway essentially. So all you have to do is just comment down below, make sure you've liked the video, make sure you subscribe as well, and I will pick someone over the next upcoming days. Okay? So thank you so much for watching as always, and please do comment if there's anything else that you'd like to see, and I hope this video was helpful. Thank you, and see you in the next video.